One of my favorite things about having my own podcast is being able to reconnect with production friends. We're so busy running in different directions, and it's just so great to catch up and hear what each other's doing. I have watched Mary Beth Anderson, our next guest, grow into this badass rock star director producer. I met her at Banyan Productions over 15 years ago. I'm really, really grateful we were able to find time to chat. And please sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy. And thank you, Mary Beth, for making the time to be with us.
Well, thank you for making time for me. I really appreciate the invite onto the show.
Let's talk a little bit about your early career, because you and I met at Banyan.
Mm-hmm.
I am talking with a lot of my wonderful friends, and I consider you all family. I see that we have this connection that, just has such longevity, and then it has parlayed into these larger relationships that we've all gone to work for different companies and we hire each other and we're just so connected, which I love, especially in a business that people come and go all the time. It's tough to have that relationship. And I would say the culture was so different, right? So you've worked for a lot of different companies. How is culture in a company? Why is that so important?
I think it's so important because it creates a sense of camaraderie. When I look back to like our Banyan days, a lot of us call each other Banyanites, right? And that's still a term. Like I recently used that term like 2 weeks ago on a shoot. I was like, oh yeah, I was a Banyanite. And that production in particular, I think we were all, it was the beginning of a format, right? It was beginning of unscripted. We were all kind of figuring that together. A lot of us was very young. We were in a city that was a very small pool. So if you were working in television, you're most likely working at Banyan. Obviously there were other places to work, but a huge percentage of the workforce was right there. And we had a lot of fun. I think a lot of people were like young and single and just like we were traveling the world and on cloud nine. So I think that,
and it was also too that we enjoyed each other's company, right? I mean, it wasn't just like you went to work and then you left for the day. Like, let's say you were in the office, which was not all that often. But we would go out together. We would hang out together. People were roommates together. It was like we almost couldn't get enough of one another. It was bizarre.
Completely. Or we go to lunch. I mean, it was super social. And, I will say like post-COVID and working remote a lot, I really do miss the camaraderie of that kind of workplace. Certainly when I'm in the field, I get that kind of feeling again. But, I don't know what it was about Banyan, but it certainly is special. And a lot of people that have gone on to other places, I think we all look back at our time with that production company so nostalgically. And if you think about it, it wasn't that long. Like we were working together maybe 4 or 5 years of like heyday. At least for me, I started with them in 2001. And I think by 2006, a lot of people had started to make their way elsewhere. So I think, kudos to the team over there. And, I feel so lucky to have made the connections that I did. They certainly are still everlasting, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you. Hello.
Well, when you say, that a lot of people were young, as you came in as a young person, did you start in research? Did you start in casting? I know you did casting.
I did do casting. So I came in as an intern actually on Trading Spaces right before that show exploded. I remember I was helping Michelle Monte and Denise like book hotel rooms over Christmas break. That's why I was brought in. And we would call and be like, hi, I'm with the show Trading Spaces. It's Banyan Productions. We make a wedding story, right? And then within 4 months, a wedding story was like, we make Trading Spaces. So,
right.
That cold call thing had flip-flopped. But I started as an intern and then I went on and worked with Faye Hollander over on Birthday for Discovery Health. And then really wanted to get over onto Trading Spaces. So I started as a researcher for them for season 2 or 3, I think. And then season 4, I came on as an AP. And by the end of that season, I was producing and directing, which is crazy. And I think that's my point about the youthfulness. I was 24 years old. I was producing the top show on cable. And I like can't even get over it now, almost 20 years later. Like, wow, like they really gave us the reins, you know what I mean? And
there was a whole lot of opportunity there. It was like winning the lottery. It really was.
It was. And
on so many levels.
Yeah. And I really was intentional about wanting to go to Banyan. Those shows are my favorite. I would watch them every single day when I was in college. I remember the first time I was at the offices, I was sitting down eating lunch with like Cynthia Fillmore and Ron Cornwall. And we were talking about wedding story episodes, which I knew intimately. Like I just had done my research because I love to watch them. And they knew everything I did. And I was like, I'm with my people. You know what I mean? I'm where I want to be. And that
well, you know, that was like my main show.
I know.
At Banyan. I was a field producer director and then was the EP. And, you know, we used to get these huge boxes from the post office and we would get letters, these heartfelt letters that these girls in sororities in college would all gather around the TV with tissue boxes.
Maybe I sent that letter. I don't know.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Now, how did you then go from that? Okay, so you had this very good experience with all of these sort of home renovating, right? Because Trading Spaces was all about that. We really, I think that started that industry. Would you say that?
I would 100% say that. It certainly was the splashiest show. And there's still things that we did on that show, like monikers that we made up, like reveal time, finishing touches, things like that, that I'm still using in my day-to-day lexicon when I reference the genre.
It's so funny you said that because Daryl Rode, my husband, who's with Keystone, we were at my niece's wedding this weekend and they were getting their photos. They rented this an antique taxi cab, yellow cab in New York. And they were staging a photo and he looks at me, he's like, okay, they're getting their final moment. And it's the big reveal. And he started, as you said, like using all of these monikers that, you know, just flooded back all of these memories, especially for a wedding story, because that's where we met, if you can believe that. So
what a great way to fall in love.
You know, people used to say to us, do you want to put your wedding on a wedding story? No, we don't. When I got pregnant, because I was still at Banyan, they're like, oh, do you want to be on Baby Story? No, I don't. My office was right next door to the logging stations. And you would hear these mothers like screaming and writhing in pain. And then they'd walk out of the logging room and come in and say, do you want to be on the show? No, hell no.
Do not.
You think I want to reveal my crotch on national television?
Well, you know that it was like all crotch shots when the logging room. It was hilarious. I mean, I got amazing education on the miracle of birth. That's for dang sure.
And I didn't remember that you worked on birthday. That was a tough show because you were on call 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah. But I was 22. What else was I doing? I was thrilled to be there.
So you also worked on a show, Great Cruises, which I know a lot of my husband and Rob Marish, and what about that show? That was ridiculous. Like he came home and I was ready to wring his neck because he was so happy and life was so wonderful. And I'm like home with 2 little kids. Was that an incredible experience for you?
It was incredible. It was amazing. Like the further I get away from it, the more spectacular it becomes. I'm currently collaborating with these filmmakers out of the UK and Canada. And, we're developing a travel show together and they go out into the bush and they were just like up in up with Inuit up in Canada. And they're sick of me talking about like, well, I did this cruise ship show when we were in like Alaska and I ate whale and blah, blah, blah. So,
were you on that show that was in the Bering Strait with Daryl?
Yeah, I was with Daryl. I was.
Oh, he talks about that show to this day.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, the amount of stuff that we saw was spectacular.
That whale breaching right in front of your boat was ridiculous. Like, did you pay for that? Wait, did you like script that in there, MB? You know?
No, it was a plethora of riches and the natural wonder, that's for sure.
How did you make the next leap? Because you started your own company, correct? Junk Drawer.
I did. I left Banyan and I went over to Shooters, Alchemy X now, and I worked on Dinner Impossible season 1. And then I came back to Banyan actually after that and did a show for National Geographic. It was actually a branded series, and it was on National Geographic Channel. It was with the magazine, and they also had a web element, which at the time was like really cutting edge. It was with Saatchi and Mindshare, and it was to promote Ameriprise Financial Group, which was, I don't even know if they exist anymore, but it was about like saving money to live your life's dreams. And that was a spectacular gig as well. It's another one.
Did you learn anything about that, by the way?
You know what it did do is it made me really sit and think about what my dream life would be. And then also meeting people who were walking their talk about what they want to do was really inspiring. And I always say that what we do, we get a front row seat to humanity of all kinds, right? Of somebody's birth or most important day for their marriage, or you're meeting Inuit up in Alaska and seeing how they use whale and seal oil in their daily diet, or saving their money so they could have a boater summit for African Americans, or the first LEED certified live workspace in Chicago. So, for me, like I really sat and I was inspired by the travel. And I think, fast forward 7 years from then, I traveled the country with my family for work. And then also it kind of inspired me to be like, hey, I see that branded stories are powerful. A great story is a great story. And even more as time has gone on, it's less important about where those stories are broadcast or hosted. And that's why I opened Junk Drawer Media. It was like a real moment for me of like the leap of faith.
When you talk about branding and so forth, it's very interesting how major corporations, I'll use Lexus as an example because I worked on Restaurant Impossible for 4.5 years and they were our primary sponsor. But it's interesting how these major corporations are seeing the value in that marriage, that relationship with a reality TV show, which early on it was like taboo, to think that a product might be associated. And then we started with Trading Spaces and these other genres, negotiating, making trades. And then like a light went off, I think, in these companies, C-suite saying, wow, there's something to this, because Lexus sponsored the whole entire show. Robert drove the Lexus. We integrated some things, but then they would do these interstitials on their website that were real life stories about people who drive Lexus, right? So it really came full circle, and they were using the genre of reality TV to tell their story. So that's really what you're talking about, right? With branding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was 12 years too soon when I opened Junk Drawer Media. It was my push for that was to create unscripted content for the web, branded unscripted content for the web. The budgets were paltry and it was, not really doable, at least for a small business like mine. And, I've got a lot more experience on my belt, and 12 years later, I'm doing major campaigns with large, Fortune 500 companies, and it's pretty incredible. So it's great. I was right. Just took a minute for the
you were ahead. You were ahead of your time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was it was easier to get into a network's pitch room than it was to get into the boardroom to get approval for projects.
Right. It is a little bit. I think it's eased up a little bit because they do see what value we bring to their world.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of those early years. You're in the business, you meet your husband, you fall in love, you have a son, you're very busy, and you decide you're going to be this world traveler with your family. How did that conversation evolve over time? Because you packed up and you just traveled the world, right?
Yeah, mostly domestically, but we did travel the world. Yeah. Most of our time traveling was spent with the Property Brothers. I did a show for them called Brother versus Brother. And then I also did a variety of HGTV shows. It was a real simple was a real simple conversation. We're sitting in our row home in Philadelphia. It's freezing cold. I have a toddler. And I'm like, hey, I bet you I could get a job in a warm climate. Want to come? And it was like a resounding yes. And so we just did it. And, I'm very fortunate. I have a husband that really, I'm the breadwinner of our family. He doesn't work. His main job is to take care of our son, our household, and, help support me so I can do what I do at a high level. And, that was another way of him supporting us. So of coming along and being alone with a little kid in a foreign city or just any old city, while I'm with like my TV tribe at work all day long and then coming home. So it was very much a team effort. It was
But
great.
I loved it. I loved how you would post about your life on the road and all of these amazing adventures that you had as a family, which really had to be bonding. And of course, your son is now getting older, but he has that real world experience of being on the road with his parents, seeing you work. Yeah. You talking about, walking the walk and everything, you really gave him that foundation. Does he ever talk about going in the business?
Oh man, he is.
I know he's young.
He's young. He's 10 years old. He's a little mini me though, when it comes to directing and managing and logistics. Like he makes schedules that will make my heart sing, like for friends. He's really into amusement parks and roller coasters, and he'll create anybody an itinerary. That just like, I'm like, oh, good job, bud. You really planned that day. Or, and he recently started a YouTube channel for sport. And it's adorable to watch him record and edit and upload, and he's doing it all himself. So I don't know if he'll ever be in the business. I think, he certainly knows it's a viable option. But, I think for him, it's like whatever his passion is, like he should go for it. My parents were great. They really supported. I was 12 or 13 when I said I wanted to become a television director, producer.
Wow.
And I'm doing it. And they never looked at me like funny. They never were like, well, that's not smarter. Are you sure? It was like, okay, cool. Like, let's go talk to some pros and get you some advice. So that way, you know which direction to go. And a lot of ways that made, my high school and college experience really easy because I was so focused on getting the Banyan Productions and, working for TLC.
Well, it's funny because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was like who your biggest influences are. But obviously you just said your parents were very influential because they never said no. They supported you. They actually, basically watered the seed, right? You planted the seed for them and they watched you grow, which is amazing. Who else are some of your big influences or mentors that you've had? Because we all need mentors, right? We can't get through life without having a coach.
Yeah.
Or someone to lean on.
Yeah. In high school, there was a guy, Jake Kincaid, who was super influential and he was a director in the sports world, and he still is, I believe, but he would just like bring me to set and help me with an internship and, really just, hey, here's a grown-up supporting his family, doing what I want to do. I was in the studio audience of a lot of shows and I was an extra in movies and stuff. So I knew it was a real job. And then, throughout my career, there's just been plenty of people, of course, like, Denise Cramsey was that person for me for a long time, as she was for many. I miss her dearly. And then as my business has grown, especially recently, like there's just been many women, specifically some really like badass women who've like, that I feel really comfortable calling up and being like, yeah, what should I do here? Or can I sound this off to you? And that kind of camaraderie where you can kind of let down your guard and ask some really vulnerable questions has been really important to me, especially at this stage in my career.
Being a woman in this industry, I think it affords you more flexibility in the kind of jobs. You don't necessarily get pigeonholed in just being a production assistant. You can be an audio person if you're, have the strength and wherewithal to carry a mixer on your body for 18 hours and, headsets and holding a boom for 3 hours. It doesn't matter. I think women in our industry can do any job. Did you find at any time in your career that there was sexism related to the work or a barrier to upward mobility?
I would say that those moments have been few and far between. I was fortunate enough to move up really rapidly. So within 2 years of being in the business, I was already at a level that I thought it would take me 10 years to get to. It took me a little bit longer to get to the show running realm, but that was also where I was in the marketplace. I rarely run into sexism, I must say. Like, I feel like I've worked with a lot of really wonderful networks and executives at production companies. And I've had a lot of like female people that I report to, I think, which makes it very easy, especially in our genre of unscripted. There's a lot of women kicking ass, you know.
There
Currently
sure
I'm
are.
working, yeah, there are. Currently I'm working with Hello Sunshine on a project, and that's a production company owned by Reese Witherspoon and her executive
Talk
team over
about
there.
badass women, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I was like in calls yesterday with the team, and I was like, oh, this is wonderful. You know what I mean? It was just all girls looking back at me. And frankly, oftentimes it's all girls looking back at me, you know? So it's out there. I think I'm in a place in the business where, again, like, you're not really running into it too much.
I love hearing that because,
Yeah.
you know, we hear a lot of these negative stories and they're out there. I mean, I've, you know, had my share of issues, mostly when I worked in news, just as a point, not in sort of reality TV and live events and live TV and stuff like that. It was really mostly news where I you know, came up against that. How do you stay engaged, you know, and remain relevant in this ever-changing landscape that we call television? There's no reason to think traditionally anymore, right?
Mm-mm. I have been thinking traditionally about it for years, so I'm just like grateful everybody finally caught up and that the money matches. You know, I think post COVID, I really have diversified how I monetize my skill set. I was not planning on having my production company. You know, I've always had it. I worked as a loan out, so my entity, my corporation, was always there, but I wasn't necessarily actively looking for branded projects. And then with COVID, trying to keep bubbles tight, all of a sudden I found myself for these commercial opportunities. That's, you know, filming major national campaigns and photo campaigns and, you know, long and mid form scripted, you know, scripted content. So unscripted content. So, you know, I think I'm just trying to stay relevant. I look to myself and my son as, how am I consuming media? Like, I watch television, of course, but I also really love YouTube and I love TikTok and I love Instagram and I love stories, and that's where I'm inspired. And so when I'm looking at job opportunity and where things will land, I'm thinking about that. How am I taking in content? And, you know, I've definitely set up TikTok stations for my clients and delivered those deliverables. And I have people in my network that specialize only on social media content, and we collaborate on projects. So I think it's just staying current in that way of how people are taking stuff in, what the appetite of certain audiences are. Certainly like a linear, live numbered cable you know, show is going to have a different audience watching it than what maybe it might streamer clients might be targeting, or who that TikTok viewer will be, which is somebody who's like in their early 20s, late in their teenagers. So it's just thinking about those audiences and trying to make content that's kind of custom for them and like helps my clients reach all those people.
It's really interesting because being in the industry for a long period of time and watching it shift and trying to stay up and stay relevant. And there are so many different ways to tell a story now. And we have been fortunate enough to have that history where we can still tap into those experiences and bring that to the table now, which I find that a lot of my clients embrace, especially when it comes into the reality and, you know, storytelling aspect. So what pops out at you? What in your mind makes a good story? And what boxes do you need to check before you say, you know what, I'm going to invest my time in developing this idea? Because you and I both know when you're developing a project, and I'm working on a documentary right now and all sorts of things, it's a lot of time and effort that you can't monetize.
Right.
Unless you sell your show.
Yeah. I mean, I would say this is still a growing edge for me is of like nailing the right projects for the amount of like bandwidth I have at this moment in time to develop stuff. Um, but for me, when I'm looking at potential talent to develop or potential stories to develop, it's really about authenticity. And then talking to those people and saying, okay, does this project meet is it aligning for you? I've always talked about like center, like everything you should be doing or saying in front of the camera should align to what you do and say off camera too. And that carries over into like when I'm directing or producing a show and looking at people and being like, are you speaking from your middle or your heart? And I think if you can show up on camera as your pure self in a vulnerable way, it's always a home run. The audience is very savvy. They know when they are maybe not being fully, being honest with or seeing things through a clear lens or not. So, it's just looking for people who are going to spark in that way,
So you're working for Hello Sunshine right now, Reese Witherspoon's company. And I have admired her for many years. She is not just a talented actress. She's amazing on so many levels, philanthropic, right. She's an author. She's unbelievable. So you had said to me, you haven't met her yet, but I'm sure you will eventually. What project can you share with us a little bit about what you're working on or no? Because I know it's in development.
I really can't. Yeah.
Okay.
I wish I'm a lot of what I'm working on right now is in development, which has been like a key focus of mine. So I'm really trying to partner with amazing production companies or bringing projects to people that I'm attached to as a showrunner. So I really can't talk about a lot of what I'm doing. I just work, I consulted on Hometown Takeover, which was produced by RTR this past spring, which was a lot of fun. And then I've been doing a lot of consulting work and just helping production companies with their processes and helping other, branded companies figure out this tough nut that is home improvement and design and renovation and how it marries with production, because those are two very different languages that you have to speak fluently in order to execute properly. So I really can't talk to you about what I'm doing. I will say it's all really exciting and it's it's Hello Sunshine, but I'm also working with Funny or Die with some really amazing known comedians who I love and has been a total joy. And I've got other projects with other people that are prominent in the business. I'm a little superstitious. I don't like to talk about it.
No. Listen, you don't want to put your cards out on the table. No. I get it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want you to do it. I was just wondering if you could speak about a project that might be in the pipeline. If you were going to give somebody advice like you're 10 or 12 or you're in college or perhaps maybe you're in another career, maybe it's public relations or marketing or something, real estate. What are some tidbits of advice that you would share with someone that says, you know what, I've wanted to do this my whole freaking life. And I put it off because somebody told me, no, it's too hard or you'll never make it or whatever the naysayers are. What would you say to that?
I would say you only get one beautiful life to go for your dreams. And if it's what you want to do, like if you can swing it, go for it. You know what I mean? Move heaven and earth. I live with my grandma, you know what I mean? And I wasn't making a lot of money when I got in this business. And I'd eat ramen noodle and, a bagel with tomato and cream cheese for $3.50 was like a meal. But I say, go for it. My big advice always, and I do have a lot of people coming to me to ask them always oh, okay. But my biggest one is find your lane, especially in this business, scripted, commercial, and unscripted. While a lot of people just think those are all very similar businesses. They are not. And in consulting, it's funny, I've really realized how very different, our language is compared to maybe a commercial space or what we see as normal, they might not see as normal at all. And you can get stuck. So if you're really wanting to be a scripted director, you know what I mean? Don't take a job in reality. Find your way over to scripted because you can get stuck in that pipeline very easily. And you can be that's where your network will grow. You're not going to be growing your network where it needs to. So be very specific. Early in my career, I wanted to maybe edit or direct. And at the end of the day, I decided that I'd much rather be out in the field capturing video of those breaching whales than sitting in an edit bay in the dark, just watching footage of it. For me as a human being, that's how I wanted to be fulfilled. And I also thought that my skill set might be strongest out in the field. And so I made those choices. And I'd say it's never too late. I think it's to build your way up in the business. It's harder later in life to take those PA jobs. They're just so rigorous and long. But it's all doable. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to do it, just go for it. And then if you're young and you're wanting to tell stories, just start telling stories. I mean, it's easier than ever. Like, I look at my iPhone, it's like a career killer. It's beautiful. You know what I mean? Like, the image that comes from it is amazing. I can do a lot right on my phone to edit. Just start editing, just start telling stories, just start like exercising that muscle. And then, take it from there. And then just say yes. The other thing I always tell people is to advocate for yourself. So if you're wanting, like, I was very young and like marched down to Chris Emanuele's office and was like, I'm here to produce, I can't believe I had the chutzpah to do it at the time, but like, I was very upfront, and I actually turned down opportunities and job offers to do other positions that weren't in alignment with what I wanted, to stay true. And I still, I believe in the power of saying no, and it's okay. It's really scary to say no, but if it's not right, don't say yes. You know what I mean? And then advocate for yourself. I think if you can say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is where I see myself going, no one else is going to speak up for you. You have to be your own best cheerleader. You have to educate people about where you want to go and what you want to do.
I'm so glad you made that point about saying no, because as someone also who has been a freelancer for a good part of my career, you have this fear that nobody's going to call you back if you say no one time, and then you end up spreading yourself so thin, that you could actually hinder your career. And you also can put yourself in a position where you're working with people that you wouldn't necessarily want to work with. You're uncomfortable with the situation. It took me a while to learn how to say no. It really did. I'm so glad you made that point.
Yeah. Well, my baby was little. I took some like smaller corporate clients in the Philly region, and they were not in my wheelhouse at all. And it was difficult, and it made me miserable. And and it was a powerful learning experience, because I was just like, oh, this stinks. I'm making no money. These clients are so difficult. I don't like doing this at all. It's all learning. No one's perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And that's the other thing. It's like, you're going to make mistakes.
Well, and you know what? Yeah. You have to take risks, because if you don't take a risk on yourself, nobody else is going to take a risk on you.
No.
You have to believe in your own abilities, or you get, there's this thing called imposter syndrome, where you just don't think you're good enough. And, it's just, that's all in our head. And it's so easy to get caught up, because there are a lot of people in our business that we're competing against. And hey, like, yes, we're all still friends at Banyan, but we may all be still going for the same job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Imposter syndrome is real. I think it's, as I've gotten further up in the business, you realize everyone's just trying to like make, do the thing, you know what I mean? And we're like, woo. And that's from people who are famous too. Like, everyone's just, our messy human selves. So I think once you realize that, it makes it almost easier in a way, because we're just all
and
out here doing our best.
Yeah. And I also think one of the things that I have learned over the last 10 years or more, I've been doing a lot of development work on myself, and it's okay to fail at something. It's okay to not be what we call perfect, and give ourselves grace, right? Because we are our biggest critics, and we are hardest on ourselves. When you're in an edit room, or you're writing something, or even directing in the field, you get so into the minutia of every detail that sometimes you miss the bigger picture. And it's easy to maybe miss that golden nugget, that one beautiful thing, right? Wow.
literally, the grace is so important. Grace for self, grace for others, grace for the situation that you're in. And then also like the ability to pivot. I actually call it panning for gold. Like that is the way that I, mine for story in the field. I'm just there with my little pan and we're swishing and I'm just like waiting for those nuggets to pop up, find the nugget. Okay, cool. Here we go. And we're going to follow this nugget. The way that I prep, some people have really specific, beat sheets, they're almost like scripts. And mine are very much like TBD, we'll decide morning of what's happening. You know what I mean? And I think that allows the authenticity of the subject matter to come forward more. You're not like trying to push your own agenda on these people. You're there to show up so they can show up as themselves.
Right. And I find that too, when you're doing interviews, people will say, well, can you give me the questions? No, I can't. Because then they're in their head wondering if they were right. Did I say that right? Well, there's no test. There is no right and wrong. This is supposed to come from your heart. So if you're preempting yourself, you lose all that on authenticity. So I agree with you 100%. Being authentic and real is important. Sometimes we end up working on a show that, and this is where no comes in, is you work on a show. I won't mention the specific name, but I was working, it was an HGTV show. And I'm like, you know what? This is not authentic. I'm not comfortable with this. And I stopped working for them. I wasn't mad. When they called me, I said I was booked and, eventually they didn't call me anymore, but that was okay because I had to do what I felt comfortable with. And I wasn't comfortable with telling stories that were manipulated and calling it reality. And so there were some shows I just, I walked away from. But you have to know who you are and be strong enough internally to say, you know what? That's not for me.
I wonder if this is from like our time at Banyan. Like that company was started by people from news, which is like a more observatory kind of foundation. Like I don't remember us ever having scripts going to field. Like you had a plan,
right?
But like we really were like encouraged to let everything just kind of happen real time.
We really were.
We really were. Like you were just there to capture the wedding. The baby's gonna come. Let's see what happens. Sure, mom might have had like a medical issue on birthday, but like you're just there to document, not put what you feel should happen onto them.
Right. You're not there to influence the outcome.
And I wonder if that makes all of us who've come out of that production house, like different storytellers in that way. Maybe that's why we feel so bonded, is because like it was very unique. What I found is like it's a very unique way to come up in the business and a very unique way of prepping for story. It was very loose, but we were empowered in the field to just like really go for it.
That's an interesting point. And I would also then say that there are so many of us who graduated from Banyan, who are Banyanites to the core, that are highly successful and continue to create amazing television and films. And perhaps you're right. Maybe it stems from sort of those early roots of storytelling that we were given that freedom and that opportunity, to share personal stories in a very intimate way without preempting or editing or influencing the outcome. That's interesting. I never thought about that.
I didn't either, but I never went out in the field with the closest beat sheets that I make now. You know what I mean? We were just like, well, I'm here to do my job. But what are we doing today?
Right. Well, and even with the wedding story, we would make a plan, we would do this or that. But then if something else happened, we had that freedom to shift. Yeah. There's the word shift, pivot, on the fly, make a decision. Well, how about, did you work on Ambush Makeover?
Yeah, well, I was the development casting, so I booked.
Okay, so talk about a show that had no boundaries, right? None. I mean, that was just pull somebody off the street, right?
Oh my God, Jody, yes. I never worked on the show, so I cast the stylists for that show. But the way that we cast them was, I went to Times Square with a camera crew, and I had these people plucking tourists off the street, and their audition was to convince them to come with them for a free makeover. And then I would be like, sorry, they're actually auditioning for the show. There's no free makeover.
Oh my gosh.
But Well, it was crazy. But like, they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea as a way to cast everybody. Sure,
well, I remember
let's do it.
Daryl worked on that show as a DP, and he would tell me these stories. And I'm like, you just pulled the person off the street and they had no idea. I mean, you and I both know that's some of the hardest, like those MOS, man on the street interviews, that's some of the hardest stuff to in the moment, convince that person that they want to do it when they've never even had a thought about doing it, and then actually physically turn that into a TV show.
I mean, Trading Spaces season 4 or 5, I think it was, like, we didn't know what room we were going to do until we showed up. And like, you literally had no plan. I think that's some of the best training though. It's like, cause you're like, okay, cool. I can produce anything now. If I can make a TV show out of like zero plan, then let's go.
You just hit the ground running. And also your mind is open. Mm-hmm. You're not hooked on one specific thing that you have to get done. Yeah, and some of those formulaic shows I did not enjoy doing because of that. We have to set the camera up here and shoot this angle every single time because it has to morph into this graphic that the room changed to look like. And I just had done enough of those where I was like, this is not where I need to be. It was really, it was making me uncomfortable.
Which is so important. That goes back to alignment, center. Am I, like that goes behind the camera too. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I aligned? Is this feeling good in my soul and my body? Is this a worthy spend of my time and energy? It's a really powerful, that gut is such a powerful, megaphone.
So if I were to ask you, and this is maybe not an easy question because you've done so many, but like, what was your best experience or the best project, most fun, outrageous, versus the worst ever? We've all had some of those really memorable shoots and then the ones that were memorable for not the right reasons.
Yeah. I mean, there was the best shoots. I mean, gosh, I would say like Great Cruises and Trading Spaces and even Brother versus Brother, they all came at really pivotal times in my life and they're spectacular, you know what I mean? For all different reasons. And then, there was other projects that I won't name, but it was just like, is this real life? Is this really happening? But what those negative experiences did oftentimes was make me reevaluate, really get centered about what I wanted. And most of the time launched me into a new phase of my career that I didn't necessarily see coming.
So where do you see yourself in the next 5-10 years? Are you going to hit the road again? Are you going to wait till your son graduates high school and then take him out on the road again?
Maybe. I mean, like, listen, COVID was a great equalizer. I don't, if that hadn't have happened, a couple things happened. One, it definitely felt uncomfortable to be in a home that I didn't own or have like housing stability when the pandemic broke out. I was in Los Angeles. I was the first HGTV show to go dark. I was working for the Property Brothers at the time. And it was scary. We fled LA and ran back to our home in Pennsylvania. And it made me analyze, like, okay, if my family's going to go on the road with me, and there were opportunities that came during the pandemic for me to travel and be embedded in a city. What happens if we go back on lockdown? What would my family do if I was at work all day and they're just literally stuck in a maybe not so comfortable rental home? So the emphasis on like the comforts of home definitely became more prominent. At the same time, my kid grew up a little bit. And so as a preteen, like his social life and friends and stability, my family is the most important thing, became more at the forefront. And then, but what it also did was allow me to maybe get opportunity that I otherwise wouldn't. I found myself working internationally with production companies. I've had people I've been collaborating in England on shows and, in Canada and all these places where it wasn't necessarily important for me to be in that country or that city or LA to be able to show that effectively, right? We're all used to Zooms. We all know how to collaborate. So it opened a lot of opportunity for me where I don't live in LA. I don't live in New York. I don't live in London. I don't live in Toronto. And that's okay. You know what I mean? And I can still really effectively do my job from afar, and which has given me a lot of flexibility, which is great. And then, with COVID, opportunities arose that I didn't see coming. And that was like doing more branded content and commercial work and mid-form content and photo shoots and TikTok stations and all these things that were frankly done initially to keep my COVID bubble nice and tight and make sure the safety of my crew was paramount. But then those spurred other opportunities. And so, it's been a very different landscape in the past 24 months, 36 months compared to what it was in, early 2020. So I don't know where it's going to go. I do know that like I've made decisions for myself where I'm trying to invest in me as a producer. So I really want to make sure I'm partnering with the right people and having like being attached as the showrunner or maybe as a co-pro with these people for these projects as we go forward. And then, my production company has really grown. I have staff and I have, processes in place so that we can do some major projects and we're ready to rock. And that's really exciting for me. So, and that's been a real growing edge, not only as a producer, but also as a business person. Like, okay, what payroll do I want to use? What are we going to use? You know what I mean? Like all that, those kinds of things and those decisions that you have to make as a business owner, which you know. So anyway, I don't know what the next 5 years hold. I hope, my goal at the end of the day is always to make like amazing programming about shows and stories that people love to watch and feel good. And I tend to create really positive content. It's not tear down TV. And so if I can keep doing that with people I love to do it with, then I'm winning at the end of the day.
Well, I have loved spending this time with you and hearing more about your life and your career, and you're such an amazing person, and I cannot wait to watch and see what's next for you and your family. You're terrific, MB, and I really appreciate your time with us.
Appreciate the invite onto the show. I'm excited for you, and I think what you're doing is really special, so happy to be part of it.
Thank you. And maybe you'll come back after your project's launch so we can actually talk about that.
I would love that. Oh, man.
Subscribe to our podcast to hear more.